I'm Dr. Ronald L, one of the founding members of the Scoliosis Research Society. President Wilton H. asked me as a committee of one to devise a means of celebrating and commemorating the 20th anniversary of the Scoliosis Research Society. This videotape was produced for that purpose. In order to trace the roots of our society and to follow its growth and evolution, I have asked the 5 secretaries to reflect on their term of office and to briefly tell us some of the significant trends, problems, popular items, serious events, humorous anecdotes that occurred. Let us begin by asking Dr. Kane to explain how and why the society began. Had there been any previous attempts to organize the society?
Thanks, Dr. DeWald. Actually, the society began as a concept when Dr. David Levine made the suggestion that a scoliosis society was a worthwhile idea at the conclusion of a continuing medical education course on scoliosis that was given at the University of Minnesota at the Mayo Memorial Auditorium. The course faculty consisted of many of the individuals who subsequently became founding members of the Scoliosis Research Society later, and Dr. Levine's idea was immediately accepted as being worthy of further effort. At the meeting of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons held at the Palmer House in Chicago in early 1966, an organizational meeting was gotten together, and John Moe was acclaimed as the man who should first lead the society. Dr. Moe accepted the acclamation on the condition that I would be named as Secretary-Treasurer to help him out during the formative period of the society. You'll recall that the two of us were at the University of Minnesota at that time, and the first 2 meetings were held in the Twin Cities. Here is the program for the first annual meeting of the Scoliosis Research Society, which was held Friday and Saturday, June 10 and 11, 1966, in the Deal Hall Biomedical Library on the University of Minnesota campus. It is interesting to note that there were 5 formal papers and 1 movie given at that first meeting, and the rest of it was devoted to work sessions on such topics as terminology and methods of evaluating results. There were 2 sessions on the Constitution of the Society, and it concluded with an open forum moderated by Dr. Goldstein. Here is a formal portrait from that meeting, and there were 35 in attendance at that first session. At the beginning, the Society's president served for 2 years' time, and since the first meeting in 1966 was considered a founding meeting, John Moe presided over the organization actually for the first 3 meetings, with the 3rd meeting being held in Houston, Texas. Paul Harrington and Jesse Dixon were our local hosts, and we visited the Texas Institute of Rehabilitation and Research during our stay. All in all, attendance was close to 100. In this candid shot, you can see Dave Levine, Claude Lambert, Ed McDonald, Burke Curtis, Bill Von Lockham, Ivor Lawson, and John Moe, and this is my back, and Paul Harrington is arranging us for the photographer. And here is John Hall, and in the background, Lou Goldstein. As you know, swimming has always been a big part of the Scoliosis Research Society meetings, and we've always had our own relay teams. And the society has been broken up into such teams as the idiopathics, the congenitals, and the neuropathics. And here's one of our early swimmers, Vern Nickel, trying to compete with one of the statues at the beautiful Warwick Hotel in Houston.
I remember the swim teams, but turning from that aspect of the SRS, were there any important decisions that you felt were taken during the first few years of the society that have had a lasting impact on the society and the way it functions?
The first decision, and this was one that caused some very hot debate at times, was whether the organization should maintain a clubby or closed type of atmosphere, or whether it should become a research society in the truest sense of these words, with broad responsibilities to educate and perform research in the area of spinal deformities. The decision was to shoulder these responsibilities and bring in appropriately qualified physicians and surgeons into the society, and thereby broaden the base of knowledge with new and innovative ideas and concepts. Had the society moved in the other direction, to remain sort of a small, exclusive club, the meetings surely would have become stale and moribund. Without a doubt, in my opinion, That was the most important and crucial decision that the founders of the SRS ever made. And the vitality of the society today is evidence that that was the correct move. And I would like to end on a personal note by saying that I very much appreciate having the opportunity to participate in this 20th anniversary party for the Scoliosis Research Society. It is all the more a source of pride since I was there at the founding and helped watch it during its first steps. It has been a joy to watch it grow and to mature in the same way that one enjoys seeing a child develop its own personality. Thank you very much.
Bill, it's been through your organizational skills and personal inner drive that the society got off to a great start. Thank you. Our next secretary was Dr. David B. Levine. Dave, Dr. Kane has mentioned that you planted the seed for our society in 1964. And I wondered if you have any comments concerning that before telling us about your 4 years as secretary of the society.
Thank you, Ron. It was my teacher, John Cobb, who stimulated me to improve communications in the scoliosis field. As you remember, in those days, the big chiefs dictated the treatment of scoliosis. There was little room for discussion or dissent. In 1964, I presented my idea about a scoliosis club to Vernon Nickel. Nick was the one who gave me enough courage to propose this organization at a meeting in Minneapolis. I was only a resident at the Hospital for Special Surgery at that time. Dr. Philip D. Wilson Sr., on the left, counseled me how to organize the beginning of this society. My good friend and colleague Ramsey Straub gave me insight, support, and encouragement. But it was John Moe who really carried the banner, while Paul Harrington coached from the sidelines. I took over the reins as both secretary and treasurer in 1971 in Newington, Connecticut, at our 6th annual meeting. Dean McEwen was president. I had little experience in organizing a national meeting and was helped tremendously by Dean. I saw the need for an information pamphlet on scoliosis for children and drafted our first pamphlet called Scoliosis, What's That? I actually dictated this pamphlet while commuting one day from my home to the hospital. Here were our members in 1971. On the left of John Moe is Philip Zorab, who was the presidential guest speaker. I first met Philip in 1968 at his second scoliosis symposium in London. Following that, we became close friends and communicated often about scoliosis until his death in 1983. This was the big meeting for me, which took much preparation as it was our first international meeting. Following the Gothenburg meeting, we planned a short meeting in Lyon, France. Here's the group in Gothenburg, hosted by Alf Knockinson, who is at the extreme left in the front row. As you will note, in the front row, overshadowing everybody, is Bob Winter, who was our president-elect, and on his left, Paul Harrington, the president that year. During the preceding year, Alf Knockinson and I spoke by phone between New York and Sweden many times. This was the beginning of a long-standing friendship, which has continued. My last year as secretary was in San Francisco, where we were hosted by Kirk Ashley. The scientific program included 4 presentations on the Milwaukee brace, discussed by one of its originators, Dr. Walter Blount. All should realize the major contribution made by Dr. Blount for starting the first effective, non-operative treatment program for scoliosis. Ron, I think that it's the time to express my deep appreciation to all concerned in the Scoliosis Research Society for allowing me to be so active in this terrific organization. I know that this has been the highlight of my medical and professional career. It was here that I learned how to put together an organization and run a national meeting. We have stressed communication and discussion. We have had the opportunity to challenge and to debate. We have been stimulated with new ideas. And most of all, we have made very special friendships. Lastly, I would like to say that it has been my wife, Janet, who is the #1 person in my life, giving me endless support in my professional world and at home. My 4 years as secretary was a rich and rewarding era for which I am grateful to all my colleagues.
Thanks very much, Dave. Ted Waugh is our third secretary, serving from 1974 through 1978. Ted, what were the highlights of your term of office?
Ron, by the time I began, most societal growing pains were behind us. And 4 presidents, under whom I have the privilege of serving, are listed. Ken Leatherman's presidency saw the appointment of the Long Range Planning Committee, suggested by Bob Winter. It was realized that there were many decisions that had to be made in regard to the future size and scope of the organization, and this was believed to be the proper forum for these decisions. Ken was a strong believer in the research part of our society, and with the influence and organizational skill of Charlie Herndon, a research coordinating committee workshop was held in Chicago in July of 1975. This workshop clearly delineated the areas for future research effort. Following our meeting in Louisville, where Ken served as our wonderful host, Ed Simmons assumed the presidency. Bill Kane had by now become chairman of the Education Committee, and he had been actively developing and showing exhibits about scoliosis. Ed was very encouraging of these efforts and asked that a protocol be developed on school screening in conjunction with the various centers already carrying out early trials. We had done some prototype work on Lightcast for Merck Sharp and Dome, and I had the opportunity to suggest to them that support of school screening might be a worthwhile endeavor for their corporation. Great deal of thanks should be given by us to John Lyons, president of Merck, for his financial support. President-elect Kirk Ashley was asked to enlist the assistance of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons in this activity, the results of which appear to have had a marked effect on scoliosis treatment throughout the world. After our meeting in Ottawa, Lou Goldstein became our next president. Unfortunately, because of his health, it was not possible for Lou to continue, and he asked Kirk Ashley to take over the responsibility of the presidency. Kirk immediately prepared for the combined meeting with the Japanese Society to be held in Kyoto in October, to be followed by the regular society meeting in Hong Kong. These were important meetings for scoliosis research in Asia, and while the major thrust was properly scientific, Kirk and Betty Ashley did find some time to assist Professor Kengo and Mrs. Yamada with social activities. President Ashley had an immense influence on the Scoliosis Research Society because of his almost 2-year term of office and his concurrent membership on the Academy Board of Directors. A better definition of Academy's affiliate structure evolved, which was important to us. My own responsibility as secretary concluded with our 1978 meeting in Boston, which was so ably hosted by Dick Kilfoyle. Ron, I've enjoyed talking to you about these most interesting years of the Society. It's been a great pleasure for me.
Ted, thank you so much. Al Edmonson is here, and Al, you were our fourth secretary, serving your term of office from 1978 to 1982.
That's correct.
Tell us about those years.
Well, I'm sure that my term as secretary will be unique. These 4 years, 3 former secretaries served a term as president. These were Dave Levine, Bill Kane, and Ted Waugh, with Gordon Armstrong of Ottawa as my 4th president. I was very fortunate to work with these fine gentlemen and very much appreciated their help and their experience.
Well, tell us what went on.
Well, to begin, in 1979 in Seattle at the Washington Plaza Hotel with Mar Mullen as local host, Dave Levine started the practice of breakfast business meetings for members only each morning. This gave us more prime time for business, allowed relative privacy for the members in their deliberations, and added an additional 1 hour each day to the recorded meeting time. And this, to my knowledge, has been continued by all subsequent presidents, as it was very successful. Now, the second president, Bill Kane, in Chicago in 1980, had you as a local host, as you remember, but he made most of the secretary's arrangements himself, including printing the program. The Kane program was the long, thin one, and this was the one and only. It was loudly dropped subsequently and has been a source of quite a bit of amusement to Bill.
Could you tell us about the treatment patterns that happened during your term and the scientific advances or similar other items of interest?
Yes, there probably were 2 areas of development or change that were notable during this time span. Segmental spinal wiring, especially intralaminar wiring, came to be widely discussed and widely used. On the non-operative side, electrospinal stimulation was a hot issue, a hot topic.
Could you expand on this?
Well, I have a small tale to tell about that, about electrospinal stimulation, which was the subject of one of 3 debates which was planned by John Hall for Bill Kane's and your Chicago meeting. Wally Babechko, the implantable electrode specialist, and John Brown, the surface electrical stimulator, 2 authorities and real proponents of this system, took the affirmative of the question, which was proposed by the moderator: will electrospinal stimulation replace bracing for non-operative treatment of scoliosis? Bill Bonnell took 1 negative spot, and at the last minute, when no one else would take the other negative spot, I was talked into taking it against my better judgment. Babechko and Brown, as you might expect, gave brilliant, scientifically supported arguments, and in between these 2 speakers, Bill Bonnell told the audience everything that both of us knew about Milwaukee braces, Wilmington braces, and other brace results, any other brace results that we could find anywhere. So I already knew that I couldn't add anything by playing it straight. So with John Hall's urging and his concurrence as the last speaker, I didn't play it straight. I delivered a parody of a semi-political agitator-type speaker as a representative of the Society to Save the World from Electrospinal Stimulators and Other Evil People. And I went up ripping off my coat and tie and rolling up my sleeves and delivered a diatribe against those evil people and who were against the orthotists, were cotton farmers, were the leather producers. They were against leather, cotton T-shirts, cattle growers, and even were out to kill the Dacron worms that made all those Dacron straps, among other things. After going on and on and on with this type of foolishness for about 5 or 10 minutes, and blaming them for everything except World War II, I finished by shaking my fist at them and finger-pointing accusation against John and Wally with these words: you saw those pictures of those girls. You heard what those evil men said. They want to electrically stimulate our teenage girls in bed at night just to see their muscles twitch. And when that comment hit, the audience screamed so loudly that part of the group from the SRS program next door came running into the room to see what had happened. And what they saw was Wally trying to deliver a rebuttal, but actually just stammering and laughing, fortunately. To my knowledge, we never again have had a debate and probably have killed it forever, but I'll admit I have never enjoyed anything of a debate nature anymore in my whole life.
I remember that debate very well. On a more serious vein, what were the highlights of your office?
Well, in Denver in 1982, at Ted Waugh's meeting, the SRS co-sponsored with the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons a basic science program on pathogenesis of idiopathic scoliosis. This special one-day program was given by the world's outstanding researchers in this area and was held on the day before the SRS regular annual meeting. It proved to be not only very valuable, but also popular, and Ray Jacobs, the chairman, helped to get the proceedings published in hardcover form. As I view this period, I have enjoyed serving as secretary very much, and Ron, I've enjoyed doing this very much also.
Thanks very much, Al. Bob Hensinger is our current secretary. And Bob, your term of office ends this year in Bermuda. When did you start as secretary?
Well, Ron, I started in 1982, replacing Alan Edmonson as secretary at the end of the Denver meeting. My first president was Les Nash, who was really full of energy and very involved in the concept of making a truly international society. Les developed the China trip, which took place the following year. He also established the International Affairs Committee. Les was very helpful in streamlining our board of directors meeting process. Previous to that time, we had what would be best described as the endless board meeting. They typically went on into the late evening. Let's put a stop to that by devising a tighter schedule with each committee chairman reporting in person once a year and a new reporting format, listing items for information only and items for action, which sped the process. Bob Keller, as historian, had begun to collecting videotaped interviews of our senior scoliosis surgeons, and he began to catalog the many events and developments that had occurred over the years in spine surgery, directly from these legendary figures. This was a far-sighted program on Bob's part. The 18th annual meeting was at the Royal Sonestas Hotel in New Orleans. One of the outstanding events here was that Les Nash created a tremendous number of novelties, belt buckles, glasses, scoliotic ties, so that the ladies at the front desk not only had to contend with the registration for tennis, golf, and the swim meet, but also order blanks for all sorts of scoliotic materials.
I've got a scoliotic tie on now.
Well, we sold a lot of it, Rod, believe me. Henry LaRocca took us out to the Art Museum in New Orleans. It was a marvelous affair, a lovely place for dinner, and we had a great evening. The Harrington guest lecturer was Dick Herman. He presented his material on central neural mechanisms in idiopathic scoliosis, and we've begun to appreciate the problems of imbalance in neurological mechanisms in the scoliotic patients. The Prevalence and Natural History Committee got off the ground with John Lonstein, and he proposed a follow-up study from the Twin Cities group to look at the hazards of radiation in scoliotics and long-term problems in scoliosis. Although the society voted to fund this study, John was able to get an NIH grant and has required very little money. This project has continued to the present time. The treasurer back then was John Brown. He was really a financial wizard. This was at a time when the interest rates were excellent, and due to John's manipulation of the funds, our bank balance began to grow like Jack's beanstalk. There were a series of great debates on what we should do with the money. These issues were debated lustily for several board meetings until it was arrived that $500,000 was an appropriate amount to have in the bank, and that we would have a juried system for awarding research grants each year done by the Research Coordinating Committee.
Bob, wasn't there another workshop during your term of office?
Yes, that was at this meeting, the Disney meeting. Dave Bradford was president, and he developed this one-day workshop on surgical implants, which preceded that meeting and went very well.
When did the multinational study start?
Well, it started about that same time. Alf Knockinson brought to us the possibility of a multinational study to look at the natural history of scoliosis and the influence of bracing and electrical stimulation. It involved a very large outlay of money, and it was a great deal of discussion ensued about this project. Ultimately, the board granted Dr. Knockinson $20,000 a year for this study. This was a big step, as it meant a significant realignment in our research monies. At this point, there seemed to be a burgeoning number of spine societies, and there was a great deal of concern. We had discussed possible expansion, including changing the name of the society, which wasn't received very well by the board of directors or the membership or anyone. And we discussed a great deal whether we should start to deal with low back pain. Leon Wilsey in California proposed the concept of a federation of spine societies, what was called FASA, and gradually over this year we began to become more intrigued with the idea. This was eventually formed, having the spine meeting at the annual meeting of the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons. The first meeting was in 1986 at the Academy AAOS meeting. Our 10 best papers were presented, and it was a very successful meeting. Coronado was a lovely site, and we had an excellent time. However, Dr. Bob Gillespie tried to kill me with a golf cart. He dumped me right out of the parking lot with a big sharp turn.
You've probably been one of the busiest secretaries, and your term of office concludes now in Bermuda, 1986. Do you have any one particular thought about anything during your most recent time?
Well, I think you're right about being busy. This society has grown a great deal in the last 5 or 6 years, and the larger we got, the more involved we got with a lot of projects, and it became harder and harder for the secretary to control that. As a consequence, the Academy was offering an opportunity for societies to join what was called the Academy Specialty Society Office, with Carol Murphy was in charge of that, and the board of directors elected to go with that. And so I'm really optimistic in the future. The job of secretary should be much more manageable now, because the Academy office will take care of an awful lot of the functions that we previously had to do out of my office with just Susan and myself.
Bob, thanks very much. We've now heard from our 5 former secretaries, and they've told us about our successful first 20 years. And President Bunch, I want to ask you to prognosticate and tell us what's going to happen in the next 20 years.
Ron, first I'm certain that the relationship between the British and the American Scoliosis Societies, which is exemplified in this meeting, will continue and will become even stronger. However, the charge that you give me is a difficult one. And I'm certain that when John Moe and David Levine and Vern Nickel met in that hotel room to talk about the future of the society, they didn't look 20 years to the future. So I think if we're going to think in 20-year time spans, we should start with something that was made at the same time they were talking about this society. And then, if we can remember anything, we'll see what predictions we develop.
What an excellent idea.
I predict that in 20 years, the interdependence of the central nervous system and the axial skeleton will be much better understood. Electrical stimulation, if used at all, will be directed to the central nervous system and not to the peripheral tissues. About 20 years ago, in a different setting, one of our founders, Dr. Wally Blount, advised people not to throw away the cane. In the same sense, 20 years from now, we will not throw away orthotics. However, The indications and the methodology will be sharpened and severely rationalized. I predict that in 20 years, the thinking part of surgery will be more directed toward the biology and much less toward mechanics and metallurgy. We will be thinking about the directing of cell populations and the development of cells and their migration to influence spinal fusions. Congenital scoliosis will be increasingly treated with epiphyseal plate transfers to provide more nearly equal growth. And even if all of these predictions are wrong, I am certain that 20 years from now, the Scoliosis Research Society will continue to have as its members men and women who are intently devoted to research in the problems of spinal deformity and who are demonstrating excellence in the treatment of these difficult patients. And Ron, you and I will be senior members then to be sure that that happens.
I have no doubt about that. Thanks very much, Will. Well, we've heard from our secretaries for the last 20 years of our successful society, and President Bunch has given us a prognostication of the next 20 years, and I'm certain that what he says will come true. I hope you've enjoyed our 20th anniversary party, and we look forward to seeing you 20 years from now.
The Scoliosis Research Society is a nonprofit professional organization made up of physicians and allied health personnel. Their primary focus is on providing continuing medical education for healthcare professionals and on funding and supporting research in spinal deformities. Please visit srs.org for further information.